Carl Paoli, welcome to the Process Podcast, my friend. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It's good to connect with you.
Tell me a little bit about yourself, Carl. What are you doing? Who are you?
Yeah, I ask myself that every day. I'm like, who am I? I wake up in the morning, and I have to remind myself. Yeah, right now I'm a full-time grandfather, which means that I spend a lot of time with my grandson, and he is the center of my universe. And then on my time off, I do some work, and the work that I'm currently doing is around sports management for breakdancers who are now on the path to qualify for the Olympics because the Olympics has included breaking. And it was something that at first started as me being a consultant for what is now Team USA, then connecting with the athletes and coaches, and now my role evolving into management slash agent for some of the athletes that are on Team USA. So that's what I do most of my time. And then on top of that, I do coaching and consulting for solopreneurs who are athletes, coaches, and creators. And yeah, that takes up most of my time at this moment.
I feel like there's a pretty significant backstory to all of that. I mean, those are already two pretty cool things that you're doing. And I
Mm.
didn't realize you were working with Team USA. That's awesome. And now that I'm connecting the dots on some of your podcast episodes about Olympics, now I'm seeing the connection.
Mm-hmm.
But
I
I
haven't
guess.
I haven't said it publicly. That's why
Mm,
there hasn't been a public announcement. It's been very underground. So you're getting the exclusive again.
awesome. So talk me through this concept of working with solopreneurs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't really know that that's what I was doing, but if we rewind to 2015, I was starting to develop a group of coaches that were part of my Freestyle Connection ecosystem, which was the umbrella company that I was running all my seminars, my book through, and everything else that I was doing. I started developing coaches that were going to be part of this ecosystem. And I realized that in order for me to best support them, I couldn't just give them education on what it meant to be a coach within the CrossFit space, the fitness space. It had to be something else. And the something else was developing an infrastructure that looked like a business, that served as a vehicle that would take them where they wanted to go. And this vehicle uh, being one that could plug in or plug out of the vehicle that I had. So it was a way of creating a set of machines that could work together. And that's where it really started. And then because I was invested in Strike Movement, a footwear and apparel company that's from Canada, I was very immersed in the business development side of things, specifically the branding side. So it started becoming this practice of developing personal brands. And then fast forward to 2017, all of a sudden I'm sitting on a plane and I'm thinking about what is going to be next after um, this venture that I was on, which was to help coaches in the CrossFit space through applied gymnastics. And I thought to myself, well, it has to do with some sort of design, but what kind of design is it? What is it that I do specifically around design? I don't really design business. I don't design brand. I'm not a creative in that sense. Maybe it has to do with lifestyle. So I just turned my whole Freestyle Connection project into this lifestyle design program. And then that led me to work with artists, writers, coaches who were trying to develop a business within the fitness space and outside of it. So it became this mixed bag of things that I just couldn't put my finger on. And just recently, I realized I'm always working with a business of one that is either trying to plug into a business of many or become a business of many. And I just asked myself, who is that? Well, that's this solopreneur. So that's where this idea of solopreneurship comes into play.
So I think we're starting we're starting with the present. We're working back to the past now because I think you mentioned a lot of other things since your since your introduction speech. And now you just brought up Freestyle Connection. So talk us through Freestyle Connection. What is it and what were you doing?
Yeah, Freestyle Connection was my rebel move when I first got into the CrossFit space. I thought, well, I'll contribute to the CrossFit Journal. I'll be part of the CrossFit ecosystem. But everybody had something. All my mentors had something. And this was Brian McKenzie, Kelly Starrett, John Wellborn, Tony Blauer. I mean, you name it, those original SMEs, subject matter experts. And Kelly Starrett specifically started Mobility WOD, and I was shadowing him during his seminars. And it hit me that I should have something similar to Mobility WOD. So I just asked Kelly, is it okay if I start Gymnastics WOD? And he was like, yeah, go for it. Do the thing. So I started Gymnastics WOD. I just did it slightly different than what Mobility WOD was. And I just started posting content. And that blew up. It became very big. And after a few years of doing that, although it was going really well, I had put myself in a position where I had boxed myself in branding wise, philosophically wise, from a philosophical perspective. And I was in partnerships that were limiting me to grow. Anyways, long story, very short. I got to a place where I was in toxic business relationship. I was in partnerships that weren't serving me, and I just felt like a cog in the wheel, just a number. So I decided to split from my partner. And in splitting from my partner, there was this undertone that had already been developing through my seminars that were called Freestyle Connection, but part of Gymnastics WOD. And the reason it was called Freestyle Connection because it was about developing the freestyle mind, the ability to look at things from all perspectives and connecting the dots in a way that could serve your specific needs. Anyways, that was the framework. And in writing my book that was published in 2014, the title was Freestyle. So in this separation from my business partner, I also rebranded and I got rid of Gymnastics WOD and I brought Freestyle Connection to the top, and I made that the umbrella company, which at that time, 2014, 2015, it was just an extension of Gymnastics WOD. Really, it was just a rebrand, but now has evolved into some other things, and it's still evolving. So this is it's like a living thing that is ever changing.
I feel like the word freestyle is very much linked to Carl Paoli, especially for people in the CrossFit space. It is for me anyway. And so where does the term freestyle, like, where did that come into your life? And why is that so prevalent in a lot of the things you're doing now?
That's a wonderful question, and it's something I haven't thought about in a long time, but it dates back to when I was 13, 14. I was really into skating and inline skating.
Hang on, and like, as in aggressive inline skating? Okay, can I just pause you for a second?
Yeah.
Okay, so me and my friends went to an aggressive inline skating here in Hong Kong. Right. So this is when I would have been probably 12 to 14 years old, like first couple of years of secondary school.
Wow.
Right. I had my first pair of skates was a pair of chocolates, and then I upgraded to a pair of low cut Rochers. And then pretty much as soon as I got my low cut Rochers, it became uncool. And I literally rode in them like maybe for a month, and then I basically threw them away. But the point to the story, I'm gonna let you continue your tangent in a second, is that whenever I say I did inline skating and I throw the word aggressive in there, everyone literally just cracks up and laughter. They're like, there's no such thing as aggressive inline skating. I'm like, it was in the X Games. It was huge. And like, I remember the Yasutoko brothers, and I was a massive fan, used to watch it all the time. And then I've actually gone down this rabbit hole recently and actually telling this story not too long ago about someone who was laughing at me saying I used to do aggressive inline skating. And I was like, what the hell actually happened to aggressive inline skating? Why is it no longer the X Games? So I went down that rabbit hole.
There's a whole documentary, I think, on YouTube about why it died, and I forget what the reason is, but please tell me.
It was basically so skateboarding and aggressive inline skating had this forever vendetta, right? One was trying to be, I guess, like more hip, more in than the other. and both had like this rebellious undertone to the like, you know, the athletes all wore baggy jeans, they drank alcohol, they smoked cigarettes, and X Games at the time was trying to clean up the image of the sports, especially like aggressive extreme sports, and skateboarding had made a shift to become a lot more of like, it was creating this picture that was a lot cleaner now. And like X Games really supported that, and the skaters, the inline skaters, rebelled against that and basically went the opposite direction. And I think the biggest undertow for all of it was that sponsors no longer wanted to get behind aggressive inline skating because of where it was going. It was like creating, you know, painting a bad picture for the X Games, which they were trying to move away from. And it was then just pulled. It was just taken out of X Games. As soon as X Games, it got rid of X Games, all the sponsorship pulled out. Athletes could no longer make a living, and it kind of just died to death.
Wow. Because the story that you're telling, I think there's a documentary on this on YouTube. Yeah, and I think I started watching it, and then something happened, and I didn't finish. But I'm glad that you're bringing this up. Anyways, just so you get an idea, I was about to not say the inline skating because it just sounds embarrassing, but it's the truth, and I just thought it was really cool, and that's where the freestyle concept really started to come up, and where it solidified was when I was snowboarding and wakeboarding, specifically wakeboarding. I just remember doing a tantrum, like a backflip, basically from wake to wake. And I remember doing it with really poor form from a gymnastics perspective, but everybody in the boat was so excited and thought I was the coolest thing ever. I was like, wait a second. So there's a way of performing a movement in a way that breaks the code of gymnastics, where people accept it as something cool. And I realized, oh yeah, this is freestyle. So that became part of my way of thinking, and everything was just in that lens. So when I got into CrossFit, I immediately got excited because I'm like, yes, this is a freestyle strength and conditioning program. And the reason it's a freestyle strength and conditioning program is because although they're telling you what the standards are, they're allowing the context of the practice to determine the movement pattern itself. And when as the body adapted to that context, then they formalized the expression. And that's why we have kipping pull-ups, butterfly pull-ups, and muscle-ups the way that they're performed, climbing rope the way that it's done, thrusters, clusters, the style of doing burpees. All of that is a signature movement pattern that was evolved because of the freedom that existed in the movement expression. And that's that I thought that was really cool. So when I came into CrossFit, that was my whole approach, was allowing the body to do the work, noticing how it did the best work, and then translating that into showing people how to do better things, or apply what I had learned or what the body was learning through a language that they could all understand. And that was barbell and some gymnastics and basic movement patterns that everybody in the fitness scene is familiar with.
I remember exploring old videos of yours when I was first getting into CrossFit around about 2013, because gymnastics for me was, at that point in time, was like push-ups and strict pull-ups. You know, we were rugby players, and so we did a lot of that stuff, but ups, handstand push-ups, handstand walking, all that stuff was completely new, that you never thought I'd ever be doing that kind of stuff. But what I appreciated about your content was that, I think, and hearing you say that about freestyle and your philosophy and how you wanted to apply it to CrossFit, was that you were thinking outside the box. And it wasn't just, if you want to do strict handstand push-ups, do more strict handstand push-ups. Like, here are different things you got to think about. It's about body line. Here are exercises to improve body line. And do you think that as CrossFit has evolved, like, have you seen that evolution continue? Because I think what I see is that at that point in time, there was a lot of evolution and exploration, and it kind of stopped. And then people got very regimented, I guess, on what you're saying, which is the standards. And all we did was the standards. And maybe what I'm seeing now with Bosman now programming is that there is like this exploration of freestyle again, where we're now exploring different variations of movement, which I think is a really great thing, because I almost think that CrossFitters of all levels was stopped exploring what the body could do. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think Dave Castro, to give him credit, I mean, he's done an amazing job throughout the years, and I understand that everything changes. And he did try to implement. I mean, he every time he saw me, he would ask me things like, "Hey, can a person do a muscle up with one arm?" I'm like, "Sure." Hey, what are you thinking? Can we do muscle ups on the rope? I was like, "Sure." So he was always thinking, how do we push innovation? So I want to make sure that Dave gets credit for that. He was always inquisitive. So, but he found a formula that worked, and maybe it became a little stagnant over the years. It was kind of less adventurous. But with Boz coming in, one of the things that we've seen is a throwback to those origin days of, I would say, 2009, 2010. That was kind of the apex of innovation in my opinion. And I mean, just an example, in the last games they had the alpaca.
Mm-hmm.
So that event was named after a workout that we did at San Francisco CrossFit. And the reason it's named alpaca was because somebody within San Francisco CrossFit's community found a picture of me modeling an alpaca sweater, and then they made T-shirts of me wearing this alpaca sweater. I can pull it up. I'll find it somewhere. And it just became a running joke. So they named this workout after this meme that I was at the time, alpaca. So to kind of see the origins of that kind of showing up at the CrossFit Games is pretty cool. But it's also very cool to see how Adrian now is pushing for a return to the movement patterns that can elicit new thinking. And although for some it maybe looks a little ridiculous from the outside when you see these really badass competitors trying to do something and look a little foolish, like doing single unders or crosses or whatever it may be with a jump rope, it's kind of like it's just giving you a taste of what you've been missing out on for the last decade approximately.
Can I rewind, Carl? What was your
Please?
What was your connection with CrossFit? How did you get into CrossFit in the first place?
I was a personal trainer, and I was running my private practice at a gym that rented out space. And there was a gentleman by the name of Chris LaLane. He was Jack LaLane, this like fitness celebrity person from the US. It was his great nephew, I think. Some kind of family relationship. This guy Jack LaLane, if you don't know who he is, he swam across the bay, across under the Golden Gate Bridge with his hands and legs tied. He had a TV show, and he was all about physical education and longevity, and he would wear like a gymnast suit on TV and everything. It was like this amazing thing. But this guy Chris LaLane, he was into CrossFit, and he saw my training, and I was doing gymnastics and lifting, not weightlifting nor powerlifting, but just like lifting weights. He's like, "Hey, it looks like you're doing like a version of CrossFit." I was like, "Oh, what's CrossFit?" "Oh, you don't know? It's this amazing thing. Let me show you some videos." So he pulled up some videos from CrossFit.com. I was like, "Oh, this is cool." And the thing that caught my eye was, because I was doing kettlebells at the time, I was like, "Ooh, they're doing Olympic weightlifting. I do want to learn that." So I looked up CrossFit gyms, and San Francisco CrossFit popped up, and that's where I showed up. Took my class with Kelly Starrett, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool." So I became a member and started showing up, and that's how I started.
And then where did that take you to? Because I feel like San Francisco CrossFit, when I think about Carl Paoli, has always been a name that I've associated with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what ended up happening was that I was teaching, I had my private practice, and I was teaching gymnastics, and I was creating this hybrid program between fitness or strength and conditioning and gymnastics and trampoline practice. So I would take my clients back and forth, and that was kind of my business model at the time. And I just wanted to stay in that lane. And what I did was I would go to these CrossFit classes. I would take Kelly's classes. There was another guy, Kevin, and then Adrian Bosman came in at the time. I was taking their classes, and I would copy every single workout they gave us, and then I would apply it to my personal training sessions. And everybody's like, man, your programming has really evolved. You're killing. I was like, I know, I'm just a genius. Like this is my thing. But I never told them that it was, copy paste from CrossFit. But anyways, regardless, I eventually got an offer from Kelly to work at San Francisco CrossFit. And I said, this is not the time for me, but I will definitely consider it in the future. Anyways, a few months went by and I thought about it and I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do the San Francisco CrossFit thing as long as I can continue to do this hybrid model of being at San Francisco CrossFit and then having the gymnastics thing. So that's how I started. And then I started coaching classes. I ran my private practice there. I had my private group coaching sessions. And then I was just, soaking up the energy that was at San Francisco CrossFit, which was one of exploration and thinking in a way that I had never been a part of. And that was all led by Kelly Starrett. And I was, mesmerized by his willingness to explore, outside the box and within this brewing thing that was CrossFit. And as that was happening there, CrossFit was blowing up elsewhere. So as those two lanes started to merge, I kind of got folded into the whole mix. And I think my biggest breakthrough was when this was in 2010. I auditioned for Ninja Warrior and I put together like an audition tape or something. And Brian McKenzie caught wind of it and he put it up on CrossFit Endurance. And that video blew up in a sense, meaning it went from having 9 views to 7,000 views. And then maybe a month later, being at the CrossFit Games, people were like, "Oh, are you the one from the Ninja Warrior video?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's me, Ninja Warrior guy." And then the CrossFit Journal wanted to do a piece on me, and they did this like 3-part series. And then after that, I had already started my seminar, so they came out to seminars and they filmed them. And then I just started collaborating with people within the space, and it was just this snowball effect. So all of a sudden, I went from a nobody to this, like, I don't know, CrossFit hero, because that's how I felt. I was like, whoa, people care about what I have to say, and I'm just making this up, that was basically the feeling. And yeah, that was kind of the origin of me getting into CrossFit.
And how did that San Francisco CrossFit story evolve? Because I did see something on your social media very recently. You were reminiscing about the old times at San Francisco CrossFit, and sounded like there was an ending that you hadn't fully processed yet, and that was still deep inside you. So I'd love to hear about where the story went from there.
Yeah. So if we cut to the final scene, I get let go from San Francisco CrossFit in a way that was done by the office manager over email, and then getting radio silence from San Francisco CrossFit for like 4 days until we finally got on a call. And it was pretty much like, yeah, Carl, you suck, and you stabbed us in the back and you stole all our stuff. And just a terrible relationship, a way of ending a relationship. That was the end of it. And I share this publicly because it's the truth. And it's not only the truth, but it's something that I've been scared of sharing, because I've always felt like if I wasn't loyal to a certain group of people, they could end my career or do something to me. And this just made me realize that there has been at least a level of toxicity within CrossFit that has been all about power and control and leverage. And it's been based on emotional blackmailing. And a lot of it just coming from a place of not knowing how to manage the growth of something that can't be licensed necessarily. It doesn't have an intellectual property, but trying to put it within something that would have an IP. And this just being part of human nature. And if I have talked to Kelly and Juliet, who are the former owners of San Francisco CrossFit, now the Ready State. Do I have a relationship with them? No. Do I support anything they do? No. Will I ever? Maybe. Do I respect their work? Yes. Do I appreciate everything they did for me? Yes, because without them, I would have never achieved anything like what I achieved. So a lot has to be attributed to their efforts and their support of me. Anyways, the way that came to a head was through trying to keep as many people as possible within an organization autonomous, and doing that because they truly believed, like, this was part of their values. It's like, you be self-directed and autonomous, and we believe if you do that, this is going to be the best thing it can be, which is totally true. But without clear communication, some expectations, role descriptions, you can't achieve that. Somebody's going to cross a line that they don't even know exists. And then when that happens, it's going to create this ripple effect that, if not addressed right away, is going to cause some damage and unhealthy situations. So that's basically what happened. And it really started to happen when the CrossFit Games started to blow up, especially when Reebok came in, and then different media outlets started to come around, and then there was a book deal and all these things. Like, money really made things feel strange, and it was a lot of, like, forward facing. It was, we're cordial and cool. Behind your back, it was one-upmanship and the game of just like backstabbing. So it really sucked, and it was just a strange, convoluted time. And this is the first time I've ever spoken about it publicly. Yeah, so I don't know where to go with it, and I don't know if it's going to help or hurt, but I think it's important because we saw during the pandemic how Greg Glassman had a little fall from grace there. That gives you a glimpse of what was happening behind the scenes. And then, you saw Andy Stumpf come forward and share what he experienced. Yeah, there's a lot there. And I share this on my Instagram stories, but I'll say it here. But like, somebody like Greg Glassman, when Kelly Starrett separated as an SME from CrossFit HQ, Greg Glassman emails him, like, goes out of his way to email him and basically say, without me, you wouldn't be more than a strip mall PT, which is it kind of saying, I made you, bitch. And that was the attitude. It was just insane. And you know what? I was in my 30s, and I felt like a kid being scolded. I was sent to the principal's office, and I just remember me and my peers, when we would get scolded like that, we would look at each other like, aren't we supposed to be like grown-ass adults? And here we are being scolded because we used a word that they didn't want us to use, and they never told us that word was off limits. It was just so strange. Yeah, and disgusting at the same time.
Well, I mean, I want to start by saying thank you for sharing. And it's a privilege to hear your story for the first time. For someone who now works with a lot of businesses, you talk a lot about love, you talk a lot about relationships. What are some of the big takeaways, the big learnings from that whole experience that have now, formed you being the man you are today?
Yeah, there's a lot there, but I think I just want to say that anything we see in others, positive or negative, lives in us too. So everything that I just said about Greg Glassman or Kelly and Juliet at San Francisco CrossFit is in me too. I have done it too. And the truth about that is that I've probably done it unconsciously. But the fact that it's there allows me to at least begin to see the people that I've been in relationship from a place where I can start to see beyond the hurt. I don't see them for their actions. I see them for who they are. And even just saying that, it's like, yeah, I want to believe it more than I do, but that's what I'm trending towards. So hopefully that resonates. And what it's made me think about and do now is be as transparent and clear in my intentions as possible. So it's always prefacing. So for example, I'm in relationships with people right now who are in a scene. This is breaking, break dancing. It's called breaking. And I'm not from the scene, but I'm heavily involved in the scene. So I'm very cautious about how I navigate it. And I do it by prefacing each step that I plan to take. And then I ask for feedback, or I ask for permission and consent. And that allows me to navigate in a way that makes people feel aligned. And this is all based on communication. And the communication that I utilize is influenced by two people. One person is Tom Reed, who became my manager and business advisor during my years within CrossFit. And he wrote a book called Task about performance-based communication. And TASK is an acronym that stands for T is treat people with dignity and respect at all times. A, assume positive intent. And this is the most important one, is that Greg Glassman, Dave Castro, anybody in leadership within CrossFit, Kelly and Juliet Sarret, they all operated with positive intent. They had a positive intention. It's just that the outcome was negative. And being able to assume positive intent allows you to see a person for who they are, not what they do. So A is assuming positive intent. That's the strongest one, or most important one for me. And then S is skills and strengths. Everybody has them, so learn to identify them. And then K, keep people empowered. And keeping people empowered is giving them the space to be autonomous, helping them identify what their purpose is, or reminding them of that, and then putting them on a path of mastery, which is not a destination, but something that you walk every day. You're in a constant state of adaptation. So communication through task is one end. And then the other side is influenced by Marshall Rosenberg, who had a form of communication called nonviolent communication, NVC. And this one is based on learning how to communicate your feelings and your needs. And there's a very basic structure that there's a lot more to this, okay? But this is just in a nutshell, so people get something to use. And this is anybody who's in leadership, is when communicating your feelings and needs, to use a structure that starts by stating your observation. So you basically tell somebody, this is what I'm seeing. This is just my perception. That is clear, and it's something that can be objective. And then after you share what you see, you describe it, you express your feelings. So I see this and it pisses me off. I see this and it makes me happy, or I see this and I feel something. So you express your feeling. Then you express the unmet need. So for example, in coaching, when I use the NVC approach, I associate it with squatting. So let's say somebody is squatting and their form is less than on par to what you believe it should be. Let's say they're just rounding their back a little bit too much, or cranking their neck in a way that maybe is just too dramatic. You say, hey, when I see you squatting, Joe, I see your back rounding. That's your observation. When I see that, it pisses me off because I've told you 20 times not to do that. The need that I have, this is now the third part of the structure, the need that I have is to make sure that you're performing at the level that you told me you wanted to perform, which was high quality movement, effective, efficient, and long lasting in a way that allows you to compete at the highest level. Let's say that's my need. That need of mine is not getting met. And then finally, the last piece of the structure is calling to action and being very explicit about it. And this is where you give the cue: chest up, flat back, shoulders back, elbows wherever. That becomes the format. So that's what has really influenced me in doing is learning to communicate better with people, and to create a great level of transparency.
And that resonates very deeply with me. Both of those people. I hadn't heard of Tom, but I have 2 blackboards that are posted up in my office that are a collection of, I guess, like mantras or quotes or things I pulled from podcasts and books that have just resonated with me deeply at some point in time. And this is probably like as I was going through a bit of my own healing journey. So I haven't really updated it in a long time, but I do look at it quite often. And like, I'm just sparked with just memories of when I wrote that thing there and what I was going through in life and why it resonated with me at the time. And I'd API, assume positive intent, has been one of those things that had a really profound impact on my life almost immediately. But I read Nonviolent Communication, and it's really cool you're talking about that book, because I don't know that many people that have read it. I haven't had conversation. I think it was actually Ben Bergeron on a podcast who was the first one who'd mentioned it. And then I was going through a phase of trying to learn a bit more about how I could be a better communicator. And my catalyst was in my business, my team was growing really fast. It had started as a group of really good friends, where communication isn't important because you can say whatever the hell you want to your friends and it's going to be okay. But as soon as I had more personalities, introverts, extroverts, people from very different walks of life, team was growing far beyond what it had started as. I realized that I no longer had the skill set to effectively communicate with all these different people. And my communication was just not leading towards an effective organization. It was creating conflict and tension. And I could recognize that. And actually looking back at my formative years, in sport and in primary school and in secondary school or high school for you guys, like those traits had always been very much a part of me, a very emotional communicator, very hot-headed, not very rational. And nonviolent communication was this kind of light bulb moment when I read this book, to be like literally every page I read in that book was like, yeah, I don't do that. I do the thing that they're saying I shouldn't do is exactly what I do. And it just created a framework. And it was nice to be reminded on the whole framework, because I hadn't remembered it in the 4 segments. But as you were talking about it, I was trying to preempt what the next thing was. And I knew it because I've just been practicing this for so long now. And I think it's probably one of my strengths, is that I'm able to, in what I would previously deem to be like high emotional, high sympathetic situations where I couldn't think rationally and I would just blurt something out or say something offensive or not show empathy or not listen to personal point of view. It literally changed everything. I think the biggest thing for me, the biggest impact that I had in my life, was I would always look at communication as right or wrong, win or lose, yes or no. And nonviolent communication taught me that that's not what it's about. Like, when you communicate your needs and your desires and your feelings, like there is never a right or wrong with that, because it's just you communicating something that you're feeling. And it completely, almost immediately would change up. It would change up the dynamic of the conversation straight away. And it was no longer for the other person about this person's trying to win, or he's trying to lose, or he's trying to tell me I'm right, or he's trying to tell me I'm wrong. And it's more we're communicating out of a place of needs and understanding. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad that served you too, because I was introduced to NVC through my wife, and when she first showed me, I was like, I don't have time for this. But then I really started going through it, and it's not there anymore, but YouTube had a 9-hour seminar broken down into chapters, and it was perfect. So I consumed that several times, and then the books also help. But yeah, I think it's super important. And I think when it comes to just fitness in general, I think one of the things that we're trying to do is we're whether it's through a body, mind, or our emotional state, is to guide and help ourselves go from a place where our reflexive behavior, which is just instinctual, reactive, quick instinct, motion to be observed in a way that allows us to see what produces outcomes that serve us and outcomes that don't serve us, and then take that which serves us and keep it as part of our program, and then take that which doesn't serve us and then reframe it, redirect it, mold it, and that becoming a deliberate practice. And the deliberate practice is simply a practice of choice, and a practice that is there to inform your reflexes, your instinct, your reaction, in a way that now, instead of producing an outcome that is negative, produces one that serves you. And to do that in a repetitive manner for the rest of your life, until there's no more work to do, and you're ready to leave this place.
Yeah, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to talk about the whole concept of assuming positive intent, and how much that has had a profound impact on me. And I think especially when I think that the concept of assuming positive intent has been very prevalent and very impactful in early stages of communication, where you're hearing about something or someone is saying something, and the first thing is to cast judgment or to assume that it's malicious or nasty. And I think I still find myself having to check myself, because the natural instinct is to probably assume not the best in people, and to assume that it was done with
malice.
That's the word I was looking for. But just taking a breath and just thinking, okay, how does that serve me? If I walk around every single day thinking that everything I see is done with the intention of malice, actually I'm taken away from my own life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm creating turmoil inside my head. I'm now looking at everything through a negative lens, which is tiring and it's fatiguing.
Mm-hmm.
And the more tired and fatigued I am, the less I can express myself in my life. And essentially I lose. Just that way of thinking is negatively impacting my life and no one else's. It will eventually probably impact someone else's when I then, if I walk around not assuming positive intent, when I then confront that person and assume and tell them what I assume, and they actually tell me you were wrong, yes, then it starts to impact others. But that's just been a really refreshing way to look at life, because now I'm living life in a state of joy, happiness, positivity pretty much all the time, because I'm not carrying those burdens. I'm not creating the stories in my head anymore that are largely negative, which I spent a lot of my life doing.
That's wonderful. And you can still lose your shit, which I do all the time.
Yeah.
It's just, that's okay too.
Carl, tell me about what you're doing with I want to go back to the solopreneur stuff, and it sounds like now hearing more about your story and some of the life events that have happened kind of makes sense that you're in this position now, where you're helping people, I guess essentially be high performers, because you've got so many experiences yourself in business and relationships and sport and athletes. So like, what is the thing that's really driving you with coaching, with the people that you're coaching now?
Yeah, maybe I think it's insanity. It's like sometimes I'm like, what am I doing? This is insane. I think there's this curiosity, deep interest, passion, you could call it, for freedom of expression. And although I can be judgmental myself, but it comes out of a place of fear and not understanding. I just really love to see when people are original. Originality is something that I strive for, and in fact, it's one of the reasons why I it's not like I fell out of love with CrossFit, but I got a little bored with CrossFit, was because the originality was no longer there. Everybody just became like a cookie cutter version of each other. And I thought, well, what are we doing here? We're all dressing the same. We're all talking the same. We're all doing the same. Like, where's the innovation? And I believe that innovation comes from the individual, but that individual needs to be able to connect to something bigger than themselves. And that's the thing that I keep coming back to, is how do we highlight individuality in a way that contributes or is meaningful or allows for something greater to be a part of it. And that problem is one that I'm excited to solve. And what I have found is that when, and this is not new, but what I have realized is that when one is capable of communicating that which they do or love in a way where many can understand, comprehend, then one is successful as an individual. And success here being defined as a progression. So successful meaning that it's not a destination, but rather a succession. It's producing that progression that I, in my head, am always seeking. So for example, in working with these artist athletes that are break dancers, breakers, their goal is to go to the Olympics. So for many of them, the development of their skill and craft is based around qualifying for this event. And the business that they're developing is the vehicle that supports them in getting there. But they would be unsuccessful if they got to the Olympics, won the Olympics, and then the journey was over. Furthermore, they would be unsuccessful if they weren't training, practicing, working right now today as if they were at the Olympics already. Which means that you can't just show up at the Olympics. You have to become an Olympian now in order to be able to participate then and do the thing. And this goes is the same for the CrossFit Games. And this is the conversation I always had with Annie Thorisdottir, who I assisted in coaching alongside Yami Tikkanen with the training plan. My question to Annie was always like, for what? All this for what? And she would just go nuts with me. But I pushed her to think about the bigger picture and the progression, the evolution of her career as a CrossFitter as something that went beyond CrossFit itself. In other words, to become agnostic of practice, to become agnostic of the craft, to allow your lifestyle to be first, your ability to bring your vision into reality, and then through that, amplifying the thing that you happen to do, which could be CrossFit or breaking or any other sport or business development or artistry or you name it. It could be anything, product development. And that's the essence of what I do and why I do it. I just have a deep interest in seeing people express themselves at the highest level.
Could you break that down? Let's use Annie as the example. So I think a lot of our listeners would understand or know who she is. So, you know, I guess what you're saying is that rather than being so pigeonholed and focusing on just getting to CrossFit Games or winning the CrossFit Games, there is like you're helping people look at the bigger picture. How do you do that?
Yeah.
Like, how might you start with someone like Annie and breaking that down and getting her to think that way?
So my first meeting with Annie was at CrossFit Invictus in San Diego. She had flown in from Iceland. I flew down from San Francisco. We purposefully met there and we trained for a few days. And the first conversation I had was, how are you doing? Like literally, how are you doing? What's going on? And it wasn't just like a good, no, I wanted to know, like, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Why are you doing all this? What are you expecting to get out of it? What are you uncertain could happen? Like that type of conversation, an exploratory conversation. And then that leading into Annie saying something like, I just need to get better at muscle ups and handstand push-ups. I'm like, okay, let's do it, right? That's what you want to build. Let's create that. And me doing that by starting from the ground up, literally, I watched her walk. We talked about getting on and off the ground. I just observed the most basic movement patterns. Then we started moving into a handstand push-up and a muscle up. And then from there, molding those two things that in her head were the keys that would unlock her success from a place that was based on the hopes and dreams and aspirations and values and principles that she had shared with me originally. So it was about fusing purpose and outcome. And then that leading to a process, and the process being one of infinite development. Now, this seems very abstract, but what it leads to is a degree of openness that allows a person to break free from what they think has to be done and do the thing that needs to be done, which is very different. The need is personal. The have tos is general. And when you can become specific, meaning you can bring a universal prescription and make it individualized, that is where you maximize somebody's potential. And that was displayed at the CrossFit Games. I believe it was the Friday night event in 2011, and it was the rope climb, clean and jerk ladder. I don't know if you remember it, but during that event, Annie won that one, crushed it. And she climbed the rope with a style that had never been seen in the CrossFit Games or within the CrossFit scene. And it was based on something that I had taught her, that I had basically stolen from circus performance, and allowed her to use the rope climb as her resting station. So rope climbing was resting, clean and jerk was the work. That's how she won the event. But the rope climb itself was not based on rope climbing, but rather on the desire that she had to improve on her muscle ups. I took the muscle up movement pattern and I applied it to the rope climb. And this ability of transferring skills is the building blocks of anything that you want to create. So that's the work that I do. Now, the way that I do it today, specifically around solopreneurship, is I help people identify what their purpose is, their mission is, and then I have that inform the steps that they need to take to build the vehicle that's going to get them where they want to go. And this is not something that happens overnight. This takes a long time. You've been doing this for a long time, and you're like, did we arrive yet? Did we get there? Is it? No, it's never done. But at least you have systems, you have standards, you have ways of communicating how you do things that when other people hear them, they can understand, or they can practice and learn and then implement and hopefully perfect and iterate on to fine tune to the point where maybe they are getting so stressed that they break, and now you need to rebuild. So that's kind of the machine. Does that help bring some clarity to the picture?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, listen, like the word process resonates deeply with me. That's the name of the podcast. It's the name of our coaching organization. And yeah, you know, the whole premise being, you know, the more you focus on the outcome, the more it brings you out of the present moment, which then actually doesn't allow you to achieve the task to the way that you really want to. So, you know, having process orientated goals and process orientated processes, and if you can get that right and fall in love with that process, then the outcome kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah. So let's see if this rings true for you. This is something that I've always said. I say process over progress, progress over progression, progression over outcome.
One more time.
Okay. So process is the thing that you should be focusing on, and you should prioritize it over the progress that you're making. Because progress today may feel like you're moving forward, but tomorrow may feel like a setback. So prioritize process over progress. If you are going to be looking at progress, make sure that you prioritize progress, incremental growth over the progression, which is the mechanics of getting there, the roadmap. This is the sense of, hey, your program isn't working. I should go somewhere else and get better programming there. No, it's not about the progression. It's not about the roadmap. It's not about the programming. It's about your progress within the program that is informed by your process. Do you see? Yes. So process over progress, progress over progression, and then progression over outcome. And progression over outcome is don't worry about getting the results. Do the progression, follow the roadmap, follow the plan, and you'll get the outcome. Now, that being said, this framework of process over progress, progress over progression, progression over outcome needs to have another bookend. So it actually has to start with outcome. So it's outcome informs the process. So the desired outcome informs the process.
Yes.
The process that informs the progress, the progression, and thus the outcome. When you reach the outcome, that new outcome creates a new outcome, a new desired outcome, and thus you start the cycle again. So it's just like bookends. It's process progression.
I love that. I never heard it articulated that way, but yes, I definitely agree with that. And I think that's the to have the process, you've got to have, that's where an outcome, a desirable outcome, does play an important role. But it's not about being fixated on that outcome. It's then knowing that that's where you want to get to. You have to build the roadmap. You have to build, the daily tasks that you need to do in order to achieve it. And you obviously have to believe in that. We always use the term trust the process, which I definitely did not make up. I think that was Chicago Bulls coach back in the day. That was his line, or was it an NFL team? Can't remember. Anyway, but totally stole it. And that's become something we talk about all the time. But even the concept of trusting the process, it's not a blind trust. So if you're an athlete working with a coaching organization, like, you still need to know what that process is. So the idea of saying I trust the process, I'll always challenge that person and say, but do you understand what the process is? What is the process in your own words? What are the things that you're doing every single day to let you arrive at this outcome? Because if you're just telling me, coach, you wrote it down for me and I trust the process, then we're not really actually buying into the process anymore. Because if I go tomorrow, you have no process. So yeah, that's great. I want to ask you then, for someone, because I think a lot of people in life are very fixated on the outcome. Especially in CrossFit, of all ability levels, they have very clear goals. Maybe it'd be like, I just want to get a muscle up, or I want to qualify to quarterfinals, or I want to RX every CrossFit Open workout. And because CrossFit is such a measurable, it's so tangibly measurable, subjectively measurable, I should say, objectively measurable, I should say. People get very fixated on that. So how do you change one's mindset? What's your process? What's your process?
Yeah.
Tell people
You don't, that's the thing. You allow them to evolve. But you said something interesting here, which is something I haven't thought about in a while. And I forget how I used to say this, but I used to say that what gets you started with CrossFit is the hype, because of the outcomes that you experience. When you see your name on the board, whether you're last or in the middle at the top, you just get excited. There's hype around that. That gets you like hooked, the competition. But what keeps you coming back is the feeling. And that's the subjective experience, thus the relationship. And in regards to process, it's your relationship to who you are in the progression of developing an outcome. And if it's in a coaching relationship, it's your trust in your coach that has suggested a certain process to follow. And I forget who said this, but I do love this framework. Coach Mark something. Please forgive me. And if somebody has heard this, you can go give him credit for this. But I believe he said that trust is built on, one, competence. So demonstrating that there's a capacity and an ability to produce results. So you have a history. Two, consistency, meaning that it happens over and over and over again, is that it's been demonstrated, it's been proven. And this is something that in CrossFit we see all the time. That there's integrity, meaning that there is an adherence to certain values and principles, and that those are non-negotiables. And finally, compassion, which is your ability to exercise empathy, meaning understanding what you're feeling without succumbing to it, and doing it from a place of building something, constructing something, and you becoming that which is being built. So that's the trust. Now, changing people's mind is something that I don't think I'm capable of doing, although I have tried very hard to do. And that's something that I'm still practicing letting go of. I'm always trying to control something. But what I've learned, and this is going to sound redundant to some degree, and if people have heard me say this before, well, you'll hear it again. But it's meeting people where they are, and the way that I look at it is through the lens of human development. So looking at people as children, teenagers, and adults. The children, they need hand-holding. You need to do things for them and with them. And realizing that the person that you're working with as they're adhering to a process, they may be in a child state of development. And this could be a 70-year-old woman who, is fully functional in the world, but maybe she comes into a CrossFit gym and all of a sudden you have to guide her through the process and handhold them. That's the child state. Then you get into the teenage state. In CrossFit, this is when somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, coach, when is open gym?" Like, how can I stop taking classes? Or they're like, I'm just going to go do this programming elsewhere. And they go venture off. Those are the people that now feel like they're self-sufficient. They don't need hand-holding. And they're doing their own things. They're doing their process. And then eventually they run into enough pain or enough resistance that they realize that in order to grow, they need to collaborate. They need to work as part of a team. And then they come to you and they say, "Hey, coach, I'm ready to take my game to the next level. What should I do?" And this is now the adult. This is the person who knows that they have a need. They have a feeling around those needs, but they need help and assistance in getting the need met, which is different than getting assistance in doing something. That's the child state of development. The teenager are the ones that we struggle with, because those are the ones that don't think in alignment with you. They are independent thinkers. They know everything, right? They got it figured out. Those are the ones that, instead of changing their mind, and I say this with this like confidence right now, but I struggle tremendously doing this, but it's just letting them roam free and trusting, like genuinely trusting that they will come around, because you have demonstrated consistency, integrity, competence, and compassion in the early stages, and you've created some healthy attachment with them that has allowed them to feel free enough to go out and venture and know that if they fall, they can always fall back on you. And then boom, you catch them as an adult.
Yeah, and I guess people can be in those 3 stages in different parts of their life.
100%. Yeah, this is not a compartmentalized black and white thing. This is something that you are at all times at different levels, and simply becoming aware of where you are or somebody else is within that stage of development is, I think, the key that unlocks your relationship to your process, and thus your consistency and rate of success eventually over time.
Yeah, I love that. I haven't heard that framework before, but I'm definitely gonna sit on that.
I made it up.
Credit to you. But I do think that what it does, it takes a pressure off feeling like you have to accelerate someone to somewhere. Because knowing that everyone has to start as a child, they have to go through teenage years, they have to become an adult, like that's biologically what we have to do. I like the way that you presented that, because now you can't fast track teenage years. Like, you have to go through teenage years and you have to make mistakes and experience, and then that forms your adult years. And okay, I like that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. And this is something that being able to self-reflect on is powerful too. I know that now. Today I was talking with this is an aside, but I was talking to a sports agent, and this person was seasoned. Okay, it's just a killer. And here I come in, this like green, just newbie in the scene. And I just realized, oh yeah, I'm a child here. So I'm not going to show all my cards, but I'm going to be vulnerable enough to let them know what I don't know.
Yeah.
And what was supposed to be a 10-minute conversation, because they were giving me the time of the day, ended up becoming an hour talk where there could potentially be some collaboration. And that was just me saying, let me assume my stage of development.
I like that.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Tell me about your relationship with vulnerability.
I'm a very emotional person, and I have no fear showing all my cards and displaying that. But as my wife likes to say, you have to know when to do that and who to do it with. And not everybody is ready to embrace that. So my relationship with vulnerability is knowing when to display it. And we can get into what that means.
Sure, knowing you and having spoken to you for an hour now, there is a framework there.
There are some frameworks, but they're half baked, so I won't really share them, but I can try to share some personal experiences. And let's see, I don't know. Ask me a question around it. See if I can give you
Yeah, well,
something
I
tangible
guess,
to work with.
you know, I guess I'll start by sharing my story with vulnerability. Was that I grew up vulnerability was just not a part of my being.
Mhm.
And you know, two parents that were, you know, kept their cards pretty close to their chest. You know, we were a family that grit our teeth and do hard work. I played hard sports like rugby, which is all about macho-ness and not expressing your emotions, and all of the many things that happened in early development led to me never sharing anything really. But not
Mhm.
even just sharing, like not even being very introspective to know that I had anything to share. And when I started to, and it was honestly a reading about the concept of vulnerability, a lot of my transformation came through books and podcasts and being inspired by other people who were doing it and knowing that it was probably something that's going to benefit me. And then, you know, when you read about a new concept or a new way to be, you just got to try it. So then I started experimenting with vulnerability and trying to share things that I never would have shared. And then was seeing, oh, actually, this is actually turning out quite favorably for me. I should probably lean into this a little bit more. But I definitely know that you're right. Not everyone is in a position to be receiving your vulnerability,
Mhm.
because it can be quite not a burden, but it's heavy in you sometimes. And you need to, I realized that many times where I unloaded in many ways or shared vulnerability thinking it'd be powerful or thinking that it might create this new connection with this person, and they just maybe weren't in the state on that day or that moment of time to be receiving it. Or it could also be that they hadn't explored vulnerability themselves, and vulnerability was something that was still very uncomfortable for them. And
Mhm.
I found sometimes with those people that me being vulnerable would actually be very uncomfortable for them. You know, what you said at the start, bring this full circle, you know, like we see in others what we have in ourselves.
Mhm.
So maybe does that kickstart any thoughts for you?
Yeah, what 100%. And I think when you were asking for frameworks, I was trying to relate it to maybe as a coach, but there's some things that can be done in relationships, period. And this is not only relationships with others, but relationship with self. Um, it's something that I would do at my seminars, for example. I would always open up and I would let people know that I was there to share some information, but it was up to them to help me extract that by questioning and challenging me. And I would share that I knew a fair amount of things, but I am still just a person trying to figure it out. Thus, I'm open.
Hmm.
That was a display of vulnerability. Um, in terms of emotional intelligence, there's this idea around empathy, and empathy is being able to understand what somebody else is experiencing. And there are three types of empathy. There is cognitive empathy, there is emotional empathy, and there's compassionate empathy. The cognitive empathy is the one that sounds more like sympathy. It's kind of like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but it's very cold. Like I intellectually get it, but I'm not connecting with it in my emotional state. It's just empathy. I hear what you're saying. Then you have the emotional empathy, which is the one that you experience when you're watching a good movie, where you connect with the character and you feel what the character is feeling. The character is crying, you're crying. The character's laughing, you're laughing. That's emotional empathy. And that's very healthy when you want to experience something. And that's something that maybe you experience if you go to a festival or you go out with friends or you're just hanging out. You want to be in that state of emotional empathy. But the problem with emotional empathy is that if you're with somebody and you're holding space with them or holding space for them, and you are getting emotionally invested, you are going down the same spiral they're going down. Thus, you're both going into the same hole. So you need to create contrast. And the contrast is created through compassion, which is I'm going to feel with you without succumbing to it. And the question is, how do you do that? Well, it's realizing that an emotion is an embodied feeling. feeling is a mental concept, and that mental concept has a narrative. So a person, you're feeling something, like something's coming up from an emotion that you're having, you're experiencing a feeling, and then you're communicating it with me through a narrative. I'm receiving the narrative. I'm getting the mental construct of what that feeling is. And then I can either allow it to embody me or not. The learning to not succumb to your emotions is that which allows you to be uh, in connection with somebody, vulnerable with somebody, but also supportive and in contrast. And that's very healthy. And this applies directly to high level performers. You're at the CrossFit Games, it's the final. You know that if you achieve a certain outcome, you will be on the podium. You just need to get yourself between these two people and you'll be set. If you experience something, let's say it's you have a narrative all of a sudden, oh shit, what if I miss this? Or if I fatigue out on my handstand push-ups and all of a sudden I can't complete them and I fall, like you start to, that's going to evoke a feeling, and that feeling can change your physiology through an emotion. It's learning to allow that feeling to come in and then for it to stay there and not change your physiology. And that coming from a place of having practiced emotional fitness, and emotional fitness being the exercise of vulnerability that happens through breath work, meditation, writing or journaling, movement practice itself, and creativity, which is a display of a side of you that may be out of the norm. And those practices funneling into this ability to not succumb to your emotions. Furthermore, channel your emotions to perform better. And this is where I define emotional fitness as the ability to move into a state of being, meaning to change your state of being in a way that translates into purposeful action, meaning that allows you to be deliberate. And this being your ability to make the right choice at the right time and not become disconnected from the essence of yourself, meaning you can fucking go get it and still be compassionate and caring and loving and win without harming yourself or others.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, as you were talking about that, I was thinking straight away about, because I've heard you talk about emotional fitness, and started to think straight away like, okay, this is Paul is communicating another great positive of, you know, a positive impact of why meditation is such a powerful practice, and, you know, seeing and observing thoughts, not necessarily letting them consume you. Can I ask you, what are your daily emotional fitness practices that you're actually incorporating for yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, meditation is there every day. Sometimes
Morning,
it's 5
night?
minutes, sometimes it's an hour.
Is there a time of day that you do it?
Yeah, usually first thing in the morning, there's always at least a few minutes there. But for example, today I've had to sit down 4 times. So today has been one of those. Okay.
I ask, what does your meditation practice look like? Is it guided? Is it self-guided? Are you plugging in?
Self-guided. Yeah, there, and it's not like I don't have a mantra or anything like that. It's pretty much self-guided. Sometimes I do need some inspiration, so I either put on some music or like a rife frequency or a binaural beat type thing, and just listen to that, and that just helps me kind of get in the zone. But it's usually just breathing, scanning the body, allowing myself to just think about all the crazy things that I'm thinking about, and then being like, what are you doing? And then kind of sitting there. And it usually just ends when it's time. And often, depending on where I am in my kind of creative process, the meditation ends short because I have this like light bulb moment. I'm like, oh, I need to do this thing. And then I'm just like, I'm off. But yeah, so that's a meditation. And then writing every day. I mean, I have a journal with me all the time, so these are being filled out constantly. That's a big one.
And can
And
I just
then
ask, Carl, your
please.
journal, is that like thought dumping? Is it a business? Is it like creative ideas? Is it just a chance for you to, yeah, what do you
All of it.
these? All of it. Got you.
All of it. Sometimes it's just like a brain dump. I call it closing my mental tabs. So basically, just like getting whatever clutter is there And usually what comes up is something that is nagging me. And this may be, I'm trying to solve a problem, or I'm trying to figure something out, or I'm waiting for a response and I'm starting to get a little anxious about what it could be, and just being able to put words to it. And then, as you probably noticed during our conversation here, I'm constantly looking at, like, painting a picture that usually pops up in my mind that allows me to see things with structure, and then freestyle between the structure in a way that allows me to adapt my communication or thinking or expression to something that's contextual. And that means just being able to perform at whatever level the moment is asking me to perform at. So yeah, that's part of my practices. And then I haven't been very creative in terms of like art or anything, but the other day I just felt compelled to go get some sandpaper, and I was just sanding some logs of, like, pieces of wood. And you may wonder, like, why you're doing it. I was just curious to see how it felt, and I just sat there and sanded. So that's one way.
What's your movement look like these days?
Mm. I do some handstands, but it's very much based around trying to keep up with my grandson. And I've been saying I don't want to try to keep up with him. I want to belong. So I'm pretty active with him. And then I do CrossFit workouts, mostly with dumbbells and kettlebells, and then body weight training. And then I've been running quite a bit, but the running has been more of a thing that gets me out of the house and just allows me to think about things without, yeah, sitting there and thinking about them or writing about them.
Love it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Carl, what does the future hold for you? What can we expect from you?
Oh no, greatness. No, you know what it is? I think there's this little fire, and who knows, maybe it's the universe conspiring for me here. But the CrossFit community has kind of been knocking at my door again, and I would like to get back into the CrossFit space if people would welcome me. And I would like to come in as an advisor, consulting coach that is helping young athletes who are on the path to qualify for like a CrossFit Games, or really taking CrossFit seriously, and in collaboration even with their parents to build structures and emotional fitness practices that can be conducive for them to whether achieve it could be achieve a career within CrossFit or anywhere else. And that's what I'm excited about, and that's what I'm seeking to develop, and I'm working on ways of deploying that. I just haven't pulled the trigger. I think this is the first time I've said that publicly.
Why back to CrossFit?
You know, I can't neglect how much it's taught me. And every time the CrossFit Games season rolls around, I'm watching. I think it's really cool. And the pursuit of the expression and ever evolving expression of fitness to me is special. And the people who are in this space have that freestyle thing and the grit, the competitive side that I just love. And yeah, I think I want to get close to that fire again, just to do it in a different way.
Love it. Well, listen, I'd love to see you back in the CrossFit space for someone who had, you know, such a big role in my early development. I think it'd be really cool to bring a lot of the concepts that you're doing now with your work and a lot of your values and beliefs into space. I think would be a really good thing for everyone in CrossFit.
It would be cool. And that's the thing. I'm a little out of touch, so I don't know if this even, like, some of the stuff that I shared even resonates. But if it does, yeah, let me know. I'll be curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does, and I think there's enough people doing CrossFit that there's enough people that it's going to speak to.
Yeah.
Carl, we have a tradition on this podcast which I haven't told you about until right now, but we finish up with just one question, and the one question is for you to describe your perfect day. So if you could construct your day any way that you wanted, what would it look like from start to finish?
You know, I've thought about this many times, and here's my short answer. It would be exactly the way it is right now.
Nice.
And I can't explain this as well as Alan Watts can, but if you've ever heard Alan Watts talk about this deliberate dreaming idea, where if you could choose to live whatever life you wanted and to dream that every night, you would experience all the great things, all the good things, until eventually it would get a little boring. And then you'll be like, ah, I'm going to put something that's going to surprise me, or they're going to be a little hard, some kind of challenge. It's kind of like a video game. Eventually you'd get to a point where you're exactly where you are today. And that's the whole point. So you would deliberately choose this. And now, of course, that is just a mind game, but it's the truth. Do I miss something right now? Yeah, I miss my parents. I miss my family, my siblings. I miss some close friends that live in Spain. Um, I am at this moment in need of having a connection with more people within like a physical community that I don't have access to as much as I did when I was in the CrossFit space. So that would be part of my perfect day. And then yeah, I think I would add in something with water. So although I'm close to the water, I'm far enough that it's inconvenient to make it happen. So it kind of falls on the wayside. So that's my best interpretation of the best day.
Love it. Carl, where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, just Google Carl Paoli, and you'll find me on all social media outlets. I'm freestyleconnection.com. Yeah, I'm there. I'm here on this podcast. You got me.
Yeah, I'd say your Instagram page has a lot of links to a lot of the other areas that people could potentially work with you or find out more about you. But just from me, Carl, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you for taking up my request to join me for this conversation. I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm going to be watching your journey unfold from a distance and hopefully connect with you in real life at some point.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you for including me, and thank you for thinking about me. Yeah, it feels special.
Until next time.
Thank you.